DraftKings best ball breakdown. We got Patriots at Bills. This is episode 14. Let's get into it.
What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge CFS. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, 5 days left? We're recording this on Saturday. We're doing 2-a-days. We just recorded that Carolina Jacksonville one. Now we're on to Patriots versus Bills. We are in the home stretch, man. All the news that we've been waiting for and kind of holding off on doing some of these shows. I think it's all the news we're gonna get pretty much. Although we probably should redo that the Rams one, but we're not gonna have time to do that since the Cooper Cup news. But anyways, let's focus on Patriots and Bills here. This is kind of an interesting, week 17, obviously week 17 matchup. If you're just joining us, if you're new to best ball, ideally you want to try to get a DFS type stack for week 17 matchup, because week 17 is when you would be going against 1,000 people or whatever tournament you're in. That's the final, and that's when you're going to need to have some more diverse lineups and basically bet on a big game from one of these teams. So that's how we're choosing to structure these shows. Patriots Bills in Buffalo. It's gonna be cold. It could be snowing. It's December 31st. So to me, I'm not trying to predict weather or there's a blizzard. There's gonna be a blizzard. I'm avoiding this game altogether. I'm definitely not doing that. But you have to think about that a little bit when it comes to your exposure on these games, because this game could be a run-heavy, lower-scoring type game. I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm still getting plenty of exposure to Josh Allen because, remember, we got a whole season to draft on. A lot of these lineups you may not even make till week 17. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here. Thoughts here on both of these teams. Let's start with Patriots. Obviously, we'll get more into the narrative side of things, but Patriots this year, maybe I think they could have a better year this year. Mac Jones actually is going to have a real offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien, and they've went out and gotten some other additional players. I mean, Zeke Elliott, I don't know how big of a boost that is for this team, but Ramondre Stevenson looks to have another big year. I think people are down a little bit on Stevenson just because of that Zeke Elliott signing and the goal line implications there. Thoughts on Patriots overall here? How much exposure do you have to these guys? Patriots seems like a perfect, back end stack to fill up as a third option or a third quarterback for you, right?
Yeah, man. So I like getting to Mac Jones specifically, and then a little bit of Hunter Henry on the back end. Just so easy to get a third quarterback, and some, we've been talking about putt tight end on some other shows. But overall, I think your outlook for the Patriots should be a little bit better than what it was last year. They were down, and by all accounts, it looked like they were going to be trending up that season. And Bill O'Brien's had his issues, and we'll get to him in the narratives, but I think really getting him in as a true offensive coordinator is going to help this team. And you can't be much worse, right? They're going to get better this year.
Yeah. So the Bills, obviously, one of the AFC favorites. I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on the Bills this year. And Josh Allen, to get to the Super Bowl. No more of this AFC Championship bullshit. You got to push through the Bengals. You got to push through the Chiefs, and you got to make the Super Bowl this year. I think that is, at bare minimum, what you have to expect from them this year. And, I mean, look, they've gotten guys like Kincaid, who has high upside as a hybrid tight end / wide receiver. So to me, I feel like the Bills aren't necessarily the sexiest team right now, in my opinion. I'd rather get more Bengals, more Chiefs, if you're looking in the AFC, but you can't not get the Bills. Thoughts on this team overall in general, and how much exposure do you have to them?
I don't have that much exposure right now, but I do have several slow drafts going on where I've kind of fallen into an interesting pick range. And I just decided to end up with Stephon Diggs and then reach a little bit for Josh Allen. And it's kind of balancing out a little bit of my exposure. I think one of them I actually went Diggs, Allen, Ramondre Stevenson, because I wanted to just do the whole thing there. And we're doing the same thing with AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts. You're doing it with Kelsey and Mahomes, right? So it kind of does make sense to get a little bit of this Diggs Allen stack a little bit. So I like it, man. I'm balancing out a little bit of my exposures recently, but like I just don't think if you're doing a bunch of lineups in the best ball, like I just don't think you want to go into the season fading Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Like
Absolutely.
they had a down year last year and they were still incredible. You know what I mean? So I don't
Yeah.
know. I think you got to have a little bit here.
All right, so let's look at injuries here. So with Buffalo, you got Damian Harris with a little knee soreness. Obviously, Damian Harris is now in Buffalo, which adds some depth there for them. He's a good goal line option. We saw him in New England, a little revenge game here, narrative. We saw him in New England as like the number one guy up until the point where Ramondre Stevenson came in and took over that role. But I still like Damian Harris. He does have a history of injury, but he's a great like third, fourth running back, you know, for your team if you're doing, especially if you're doing zero RB. I think he's a solid option in that range, as well as shorter. The wide receiver is on IR. Going over to the New England side, it looks like you have Thornton on IR with a shoulder injury. He's a 4-week IR guy, and then Gesicki with a shoulder dislocation. Thoughts on injuries here? What's jumping out to you? There's not a whole lot of news to talk about, but New England has been in and out of injury issues kind of this whole summer.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing too crazy that's been sticking out for me. Obviously, Tyquan Thornton is one who was severely impacted, but I just didn't have much exposure to him anyway. Damian Harris is another guy. I just think his injury issues are baked into his ADP. And honestly, at where he's going now, I think you can kind of scoop him up a little bit, probably for a bit of a value. They'll rotate him in whenever he's healthy. So I do like getting a little bit of him now that he's slipping.
All right, let's go to narratives here. So we talked a little bit about Bill O'Brien. They actually have like a real offensive coordinator this year. You know, Matt Patricia / nobody was the offensive coordinator. There was a bunch of controversy about that. Mac Jones was not happy last year. You could see it. They kind of set him up for failure last year, but now he's the guy. Like Bailey Zappi last year had a couple starts, and there was always some rumors about, oh, Bailey Zappi might be the guy. Well, Bailey Zappi got cut, signed to the practice squad. Cunningham was an interesting dude in preseason. Wide receiver / quarterback hybrid. He was cut, added to the practice squad, and they got Matt Corral as their backup. So Mac Jones is the guy. We don't have to worry about like, oh crap, is he going to get benched or whatever? He's going to be the guy. So as a late round dude, that's a great option to fill out your stacks. So New England, like I said, you know, there is some upside I think this year. Buffalo, Damian Harris came over. What are some narratives on the Buffalo side? Like, where the Kincaid is to me like one of the biggest stories that I've been getting a ton of Kincaid. It's kind of worrisome, but at the same time, the dude's a wide receiver, right? I think he's the third option clearly, and you know, getting him and Knox together isn't even a crazy thing to do. I know you're getting two tight ends, you know, position wise, so it's kind of a weird thing. But what are your thoughts on Bills narrative wise? What are you thinking going into the season here?
I think there's just a lot of question marks on this team. I think the people were really questioning whether Stephon Diggs still wanted to be here, and yeah, I was hoping that would hurt his ADP a little bit. Of course, it didn't, but I think Stephon Diggs still wants to be there. I think he wants to win, and people are kind of misunderstanding what he's saying. So I think, yeah, him and Allen really are going to have something to prove this year, but. I also think because of Gabe Davis's kind of disappointing season last year, people are just forgetting the guy exists and where he's going. The wide receiver that he's going around, like you're running low on guys who are catching the ball from elite quarterbacks at that point. So, look, man, I think Bills are just a quiet team that people aren't really. The AFC is just so loaded that I just think that people are forgetting about some of these players on the Bills, man.
Yeah, and obviously you got James Cook as that number one dude on paper. How effective is he going to be as a main back, getting most of the carries? We still don't know how that's going to work out. You know, we just don't know. They were one of the teams that were actually looking to get Dalvin Cook, which kind of makes you think, all right, well, did they have the real faith in James Cook or not? Which would have been really fucked up to go get a dude's brother to replace him as the number one running back. That would have been kind of fucked up. All right, let's get to this breakdown. Let's do it. Break it down. There we go. All right, breakdown. We're gonna go through all these guys here. Stephon Diggs going around pick 8. Sometimes he drops. I never see him being reached on. You typically. He's one of these guys that if I get pick 8, which pick 8 is one of my highest exposed picks, I think I have that the most out of all my like 260 drafts. And when it comes to Diggs, typically I'm like, all right, I'll just take Diggs here. Lately, because I have a good amount of Diggs, I've been kind of mixing it up, and I'll get Bijan, I'll get a couple other guys, I'll get AJ Brown or something every once in a while. Thoughts on Diggs here, as well as if you get Diggs, are you always looking to get Josh Allen with him? I mean, look, if Diggs has an incredible season as a number 8 pick on your team, you have to assume that Josh Allen is going to have that good of a season as well with it. Is there any reason to not pick Josh Allen when you grab Stephon Diggs?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're getting Stephon Diggs, you're probably 7, 8, or 9, right in that range. He's not slipping very much, so it means if you're taking him in round 2, you're reaching a little bit. If you're taking him in round 3, you're banking on Josh Allen falling a little bit. So it really comes down to what's going on. But in that range, you do really have a bunch of other quarterbacks than what like Chris Olave and Jalen Waddle, which again are fine picks. But to your point, if Stephon Diggs has when he has another 1,000-yard season and is one of the top fantasy wide receivers, like we know that Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen has an MVP. He is an MVP caliber season too. He's an MVP candidate as well this season. So, look, man, I think you're fine stacking. I don't know if you necessarily need to reach, but like I said, recently I just been getting a lot of pick 8. So, I've been doing both. I reach one, hope he falls in one, and
Yeah.
then missed on him in another. So then I'm covered.
Yeah, I mean, typically speaking, you're going to have to reach about 7 picks for him, and then if you want to get Ramondre on the other side of it, which it was a lot more difficult to do, when he was going at pick 28, but you can reach about 3 spots and get Ramondre. Diggs Allen with Ramondre run back is really really fun. I've been getting into it a lot more lately, and it honestly, it gets you a pretty balanced, first 3 picks. Then you can really stack up these wide receivers. Get it, as you get into the 6th, 7th, 8th round, you can have your 5 wide receivers by that point. So how much Ramondre Stevenson do you have? And excuse me, I know he's fallen because of Zeke Elliott. Does that matter? Like how much really a guy that's signing, a few weeks into camp, how much really is that going to affect Ramondre, who's one of the top running backs in the league?
So honestly, I don't think it's really going to affect him at all. If he loses a couple touchdowns, that's like I'm not going to stress too much about it. We like Ramondre because of his PPR upside anyway. So who knows? He adds a couple 100-yard bonuses, a couple extra receptions per game. It could be close to a wash. But I like him now that he's a little bit cheaper. I mean the guys that you have around him are what ETN and I guess Joe Mixon at this point, right? So like, I don't know, man. Why not? Why not? Yeah. So you got Travis Etienne, Amari Cooper, Joe Mixon. Those are the guys directly after Ramondre Stevenson. I think that's a perfect range to be taking Ramondre, even if you don't want to stack this game at all. If you want to just have an anchored running back build or whatever, then you want to start with Ramondre. I think he's fine, especially now that he's barely costing you a 3rd round pick and sometimes sliding a little bit more.
So I have 5% James Cook. I'm not actively avoiding him, but around that range, like James Cook right there, I'd rather just get Gabe Davis, especially going in that 5th, 6th round. I'm probably committed to either having a stud anchor running back at this point, or I'm going 0 running back. I'd rather not have James Cook as my number 1 dude. No offense. I'd rather just get Gabe Davis since they're going right around the same spot, especially if I've already gotten these stacks going. Now, James Cook as like a one-off, maybe, but like, what's your exposure on Cook? I know he has pass catching upside, and I was pretty big on him last year as like a backup. But now, as the main dude, I just don't know what to expect from him. Am I overlooking him? Should I be getting more of him? What do you think?
So I'll probably finish the season or finish drafting closer to 9 to 10%. I think I have 5% currently. And like really, like I haven't been targeting him. He just seems to be landing as one of the better available players at where I'm at, right? So if you're stuck looking at running backs, you have Madison, Cook, and now Jonathan Taylor in that same range. Now you do have some excellent wide receivers in Lockett, Gabe Davis, and Chris Godwin, Jahan Dotson, but there's a lot of questions there too. So like those are guys like personally I have a decent amount of exposure to already. Because to your point, I do like Gabe Davis, especially in this range. Like I don't know if he necessarily warrants going. What is this like wide receiver 25? He could easily end up outscoring, guys like Brandon Ayuk or even Deontay Johnson, right? So, um,
Yeah.
look, I like Gabe Davis, but I think having a little bit of sprinkled in exposure to James Cook is important because if you want to stack this game or get a little exposure to, you can go on the back end, try and grab Mac Jones and Hunter Henry or one of these wide receivers that what was it Kendrick Bourne not Bourne, it's Butte, whatever his name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think that's a guy that you can steal in late rounds to kind of back end this stack too. So I don't mind James Cook, man, and I think balancing some of your exposure, he's probably going to be pretty consistent in ADP right now. So if you haven't gotten to him, you don't really need to reach. You kind of know where he's going to be.
So let's talk about Dalton Kincaid. So to me, I feel like you're either all in on him or you hate him. In my opinion, based on what I'm seeing on Twitter and people's opinions on this, like before camp happened, nobody was really convinced about him and all these rookie tight end stats throwing out there about them having down years. Fine, that's great, but is Dalton Kincaid an actual real tight end? Is he more like an Evan Ingram type? I think so. And based on what we saw in camp, him and Josh Allen have a pretty good rapport going. And ever since camp happened, we realized, all right, this guy's not maybe just a tight end. And he's gone up quite a bit, I think, since then, or at least since like the beginning time of drafting in May. So thoughts on Kincaid? I got 15% of him. Him and Dulcich are like my two highest owned tight ends, which is a little scary. Don't get me wrong. But these guys have huge upside, right? And they're cheap.
Yeah, man, I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. I'm at 11%. Again, I kind of dwindled off with a little bit of him just because I was getting him so early on. But I think that he's fine kind of being a tight end one, tight end two, especially. And if you want a couple different pieces at the position, I think like he's perfect for I don't know if this qualifies as punt tight end, but getting him as your first tight end and then backing him up with a couple random dudes, right?
Yeah.
I think like he's one of the perfect guys to do that with. And even you were talking about Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, and I know that can seem kind of silly, but if we think Dalton Kincaid's going to actually be a wide receiver in the offense, then that means like there are going to be weeks where maybe having both those tight ends won't be negatively correlated,
Yeah.
just the way that the offense is running. So yeah, man, I think it's worth considering. I think again, like he's in this range, right? You have Zach Charbonnet, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, Jamal Williams, Nico Collins. Like I don't know, like if you're getting to some of those guys, like that's fine. I still think that you can probably take Dalton Kincaid ahead of some of them, right? Jamal Williams is going to get 3 games and then not be a starter anymore or whatever. So like there's risks associated with that. Dalton Kincaid is going to be wide receiver 3 or tight end 2 or maybe tight end 1 and wide receiver 2 sometimes. So there's just upside there.
Yeah, and we won't talk too much about Knox, but if Knox is the every down tight end, he's listed on the depth chart as number 1 tight end. Kincaid is listed as number 2. So if you think that Dawson Knox is the number 1 tight end and is going to be on the field quite a bit, while Dalton Kincaid is kind of that second tight end / running around in the slot, I don't see any issue with getting both of these guys if you have to. Now, I'd probably end up maybe getting 4 tight ends, or like let's just say I had a stud tight end, like if I get Kelsey or something, and then I get Kincaid and Knox, like maybe that's okay. But I'm probably going to end up getting 4 tight ends if I do that. And look, it's a little galaxy brain to kind of do that. I'm not like looking for it, but a lot of times Dawson Knox is just chilling around pick 180 and he's available. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to do it. So what are your thoughts on Juju? I have about 5% Juju Smith-Schuster. I'll grab him. He's going right in that round 10 range. So to me, I like to obviously have those 5 wide receivers by that point. So I'll grab him if he's available, as well as I'll grab him as a one-off in addition to grabbing him as additional on the stack. So what are your thoughts on Juju? He's clearly the number one guy. I think he has a pretty high floor, in my opinion, unless he gets injured. Like, am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy. I don't, especially the way we've been drafting though too. Like you got to remember, it's not too risky grabbing him where he's at. You're getting wide receiver 6, 7 at that point. So when you're drafting him solely for a spike week at that point, you have a pretty consistent core. Like he would probably have to have a spike week to even need to make your lineup. So I like Juju, man. I think he's an interesting way to run it back. Personally, I've only gotten 2%. Again, it's just more kind of what's in that area. I mean, just everything's changed so much now, though. Like Raheem Mostert's now in the same area, and that's not a terrible pick at this point either. So, like, you just got to be aware of movement and just understand the opportunity cost with some of the guys that you're around. Juju Smith-Schuster might be a consistent, 8 to 12 points a game, but Raheem Mostert's going to have 2 weeks probably where he has like 25 points and then never scores a point the rest of the season. So, like, you just got to be aware of that when you're building.
All right, so mid-round type running backs that I have no problem taking. Zeke Elliott, he was going in the 175 range, and I had him when he was a free agent falling in the 200s, and I do grab him up every time because the chances that he was going to get signed were pretty high. And if he got signed to a team that needed him and he was going to get utilized, getting him in that 175 range, now you see, he's moved up like 35 picks. So Zeke Elliott in this range, and as well as Damian Harris. What are your thoughts on these two guys, man? I find myself grabbing both of these guys quite a bit. Where are you at?
I get a little bit of Zeke Elliott. I've been trying to get a little more Damian Harris because I didn't get much of him earlier on. Zeke was a guy that I was taking as like a RB 5 or 6. Just earlier on, I figured he was going to get drafted, so I kind of lucked out in this situation. I don't need to get too much exposure to him at his current ADP. So I'll get to him if I'm in that range and I don't really feel comfortable with whoever's left there. But I think both these guys should probably be in your lineups. There are going to be games where James Cook is not being effective and Damian Harris needs to get used. And there's going to be a couple games where Zeke vultures 3 rushing touchdowns. So, I think it's something to keep in mind. You want to get a little exposure here.
I could see Damian Harris getting like 10 rushing touchdowns this year. I know that sounds crazy, but they're not giving the ball. They're not giving the ball to James Cook on the goal line. You could end up with a Jamal Williams type year out of Damian Harris randomly. All right, so we got to talk about all these New England wide receivers, man. Throw a dart. I have absolutely no clue. Besides Juju, you got Demario Douglas, who's hurt. I didn't mention him. Tyquan Thornton also hurt. Keyshawn Butte. Kendrick Bourne, we've seen him last year with the Patriots. I don't know, dude. Like, it's just a clusterfuck. I mean, Devontae Parker on paper is probably the safest pick. You got Juju, Devontae Parker, and Kendrick Bourne as your on the depth chart as your starters. Where do we go, man? Like, I don't have like a ton of these guys, but like they're very easy to fill in a Mac Jones stack at the end of the draft, right?
Yeah, man. So, like, I'll just point out this is why it's really easy to end up with Hunter Henry back here, just because there's just a bunch of just a bunch of bullshit as far as wide receiver goes. But if we're going with anybody here, you got to ask yourself, like, what are you looking for? I think Devontae Parker is probably the more realistic option to get consistent points. But at this point, you shouldn't be looking for consistent points from your wide receiver 8 or 9. That's not what you need. You're again looking for spike weeks. So I think you can have a little bit of Devontae Parker, but I think it's okay to sprinkle in a little Kendrick Bourne, maybe Thornton before he was hurt, or if you still think he can get involved. But I do like Keyshawn Butte or whatever the hell his name is. I think we saw a little bit of explosiveness out of him in preseason. But if there's going to be a guy with potential upside late in the year during the playoff week, maybe that's the guy that they're giving a little extra run to. So I like him. I think you're fine getting to some of these guys. Even on Buffalo, you got Trent Sherfield and Justin Shorter. I think both those guys are worth getting to. Shorter obviously is injured now or whatever, but Deontay Hardy, right? These are guys that are going to get some work and get involved in the offense at some point. And Trent Sherfield, we've seen it. Like, he can have 80 yards and a touchdown just out of fucking nowhere. It happens like every 3 years.
So, Khalil Shakir was kind of banged up. There was rumors that he wasn't the number 3 guy, that, maybe is it Sherfield? Is it Hardy? And his ADP has dropped quite a bit. Khalil Shakir has. But it seems like right now on paper, he's probably slated to be that number 3 guy. But it feels like to me, as a number 3 pass catcher, this is kind of a situation like how Miami has 2 studs and then nobody else as far as pass catchers. To me, I'd rather end up going with one of the 2 tight ends for either of these teams, or for Buffalo here, as opposed to Khalil Shakir. Gesicki's hurt. Like I said in the opener, he's got a shoulder dislocation, so he's going at the end of the drafts now. If you want to find a tight end that has two touchdown potential in the 20th round, it might be worth the risk, especially, obviously he needs to be like your 3rd tight end. You can't really trust him to stay healthy or trust him to have consistent weeks. But we know what to expect out of Hunter Henry. Every once in a while, we get a touchdown out of him. We know what to expect out of Mike Gesicki when it comes to, we saw him in Miami. We saw him have some pretty big weeks, but he's not a guy that you can keep on the field the whole game. He's kind of a liability in the blocking game. So we got to be aware of that. There's really nobody else here that I'm interested in at the end of the draft. Besides that, I think coming out of this, Dalton Kincaid, in my opinion, is one of these guys that I'm super all in on. And if he screws me, then it is what it is. It is unfortunate, but he is a tight end. And usually by this point, I've either got a stud tight end and I'm using Dalton Kincaid as like upside for spike weeks, or I'm doing 0 tight end type builds at this point. All right, so let's look at a lineup here that Ellie sent me. So we've got this is Travis Kelce, number 1 pick. You got Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen. So Ramondre Stevenson here. I don't know if he has this stacked quite a bit. Let's see. We've got 2 Buffalo. Okay, so he's got Knox, Latavius Murray, and then Ramondre Stevenson as a run back. I don't have the screenshot on me, but I do have a lineup that I did like 2 days ago that has Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Ramondre Stevenson, and I actually grabbed Justin Herbert in the 5th round, which that's a lot of quarterback equity to have, but I only got 2 quarterbacks. I got Josh Allen in the 2nd round, Justin Herbert in the 5th round, so I ended up with Buffalo stacks and Charger stacks. Of course, I had Kincaid, and in that lineup, I also had Dawson Knox, so that was pretty nice. Getting these Ramondre Stevenson lineups here, getting some Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen stacks are pretty important. So I think we lost Ellie here. There he is. Ellie, I was talking about this lineup here that you did. What jumped out to you here before we move on to our final thoughts?
Yeah, not too heavy on the front end stack here for Buffalo, New England, but I did like getting Garrett Wilson, Keenan Allen, and then Ramondre Stevenson. It's just so hard not to take him when he drops as far as 42,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so final thoughts here, man. This is our, let's see, 3rd to last show. We've got 2 more shows we're gonna record tomorrow. Who are those final shows there? I'm losing track. We got Vegas and Indy, and then New Orleans and Tampa Bay as our final show. So hit subscribe. Obviously, we're gearing up for DFS season, for Showdown, for main slate. You know what to expect from us when it comes to Showdown. We'll be doing 3 island games a week. So hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys later.